She's now in her dream home. Her parents walked through that dream home and could not believe where they were. Her daughters were watching a mother who is leaving proof that you do not have to wait for someone to come get you. You can go get there yourself. She knew the quality of her work, and she could see clearly that it was not being recognized by the people who had the power to move her forward. But here's the part of Candice's story I want to focus on today, because it's not just about being overlooked. It's about something more specific and more structural than that. Research consistently shows that women, and women of color in particular, have access to mentors roughly the same as men. What they don't have access to at anywhere near the rate is sponsors. Enough already! You've worked harder, stayed later, smiled through it, you've shrunk yourself, you've overexplained yourself, you've apologized for yourself, and still walked away feeling like you were the problem. You weren't. You've been playing by rules that were never designed for you, and you're exhausted. You're done. I'm Coach Mo Fall, and this is Enough Already, the podcast for women who are done performing and ready to heal, reclaim, and redefine what their life actually gets to look like when you step into your real power. No more shrinking, no more trying to be less or more, or whatever they need you to be. We're going to name exactly what happened, get free from it, and figure out what comes next. This is your space. This is your moment. Women, we are rising. Let's get into it. I've got so many stories from the trenches, but I want to tell you about one. She watched a colleague walk in, brand new, and get handed everything. The introductions, the information, the invisible roadmap that tells you how things actually work around here. She watched it happen. She looked around and she understood nobody was coming to do that for her. So she made a decision not to be bitter, not to wait, to become the woman she had been waiting for. That is what we are talking about today. Enough already. Welcome back. This is Coach Mo, and this is the final episode of the first arc of this show about how women who I've coached have risen above and have decided to take a step toward courage, a step toward their soul. And I want to spend a moment before we get into it, acknowledging what we've covered together, because the women who have been with us from the beginning have done real work just by listening. We've talked about why strategy without soul always fails. We've looked at the real lifetime cost of the pay gap, not as a feeling, but as a number with your name on it. And we've named the gremlin, given it a performance review, and taken its authority away. We've sat with Christine in front of a microphone on the 22nd anniversary of her mother's death and watched what happens when a woman chooses to use her voice again. We've walked with Kirsty from a job that was containing her to Miss Maine, to the WNBA, to a marriage and a baby on the way. That is not just a podcast, it's a body of work, and you've been part of it. Today, I want to close this arc with an episode that I think is the foundation underneath all of the others, because every single story that I've told here, every client, every framework, every moment of breakthrough has at its root the same recognition. Nobody's coming. Prince Charming is not going to save the day and kiss you at the last minute to wake you up. Nobody is coming. It is your call to radical self-responsibility. And as a young girl, even though I wasn't into the prince's stories, I heard all of them. And I wasn't sure what truth really was. But the fairy tales were coded in something mysterious and romantic, something that felt like I was supposed to believe them. And it creates this deep narrative that someone's coming to rescue us. But nobody's coming to hand the roadmap, to sponsor you in a room where decisions are being made. Nobody's coming to see you clearly and say you're ready. Let me help you get there. The mentor they needed, the advocate they deserved, the woman who would have made the path smoother and the ceiling higher, she was not there. So each of these women made a decision not to be bitter about the absence, to be radically responsible, to not keep waiting for something that was not coming, to become for themselves the woman they had needed all along. That is this episode. And I want to start by telling you something I've not said directly enough across the entire series. I was that woman too. And I think as a human being, we have this potential nature that something's going to save the day. That's why stories and fairy tales are so popular. I spent nearly 30 years in healthcare leadership, and I rose through the ranks. I made it to the twice, actually, to the highest levels of executive leadership in a field that was not designed to put women like me in there, let alone women who started out as a nurse in a field run and bossed around by doctors. And I want to be clear about something. I did not get there because someone came for me. I did not get there because a mentor appeared and handed me the invisible roadmap. I did not get there because the system looked at me and said, "Oh, you're ready. Let us clear the path." I got there the hard way. I got there by figuring it out, by reading every room correctly and learning, by paying the price when I didn't, by learning which battles to pick and which ones would cost me more than they were worth, by doing the contortion work, the exhausting daily invisible work of making myself fit into spaces that were not built for how I think, how I lead, or what I care about. I got there. And when I got there and looked back down the ladder, I saw something that I could not unsee. The women below me were doing the same thing I had done, but many of them were shying away from the step up. They were working harder than their male counterparts, but they didn't believe in themselves. So they said, "No thanks, not now." I literally tried to promote women who said no to me, even though I said, "I will support you, I will help you." "No, I'm not ready." And you know what I said to some of them? "Yes, you are. Let's go." The women on the ladder who did not climb up were waiting patiently, strategically, professionally for someone to come notice them and come get them. And I sometimes was that leader, not because I felt that that was the best thing for that person, but because I felt like it was the necessary hand up the ladder. They were carrying the emotional tax of being the only one in rooms that were not built for them. They were figuring out along the way, the hard way, the same way I had. And I realized something. I realized that I had spent 30 years accumulating knowledge about how power actually works, about what it takes to rise without losing yourself, about the soul work that has to happen before the strategy will stick. And that knowledge was sitting inside one organization, serving one company's bottom line when it could be serving every woman in every organization. And that's why I left corporate. Not because I failed. I was having my best years of my career. I was loving the work I was doing. Not because I burnt out, because I realized that the most important work I could do was not inside one room or one organization. It was for every woman who was sitting in a room like the ones I had survived, doing the work, paying the tax, waiting for a mentor who was not coming. I became the mentor, not because I had always planned to, because I looked around and understood that if I did not do it, too many women would spend too many years waiting for something that was never going to arrive. And that's the origin of my work. That's the origin of this show. And I recently changed the name to Enough Already because that is the basic feeling I have when I see the statistics, when I talk to another client, when I talk to a woman I've never met before and her story is the same. And I know, not as a bio fact, but as a lived truth, because it means that everything I teach comes the hard way from having been exactly where you are, not having looked around at a specific moment, understood that nobody's coming, and choosing in that moment to become the woman I needed. That was a powerful choice, as it has been for every client. And I want to tell you about Candice. Candice is a senior solutions consultant in tech. She's an engineer by training, a business owner by choice. She's got two things going on. She's a woman of faith by foundation and one of the most deliberate human beings I have ever had the privilege of coaching and working with. She came to our program from South Carolina, now living in Virginia, and she came with a specific kind of frustration that I recognize immediately because I've seen it so many times. She knew the quality of her work. She knew how many hours she put in. She knew that she was delivering and what it was worth. And she could see clearly, undeniably, that it was not being recognized by the people who had the power to move her forward. But here's the part of Candice's story I want to focus on today, because it's not just about being overlooked. It's about something more specific and more structural than that. Candice watched it happen in real time. A colleague arrived, new, and got handed everything: the introductions, information, access, the invisible network of relationships and knowledge and insider understanding that tells you how things actually work inside an organization, not the official version, the real one, and the ones that move people forward. Candice watched the transfer happen freely, automatically, without the new colleague even having to ask. And then she looked around and she understood that network, that invisible mentorship infrastructure, was not operating the same way for her. Not because she hadn't earned it, not because she was not delivering, but because the informal systems develop people, the lunches, the introductions, the conversations where someone with power says, let me tell you how it actually works. Those systems were not designed with her in mind, and they were not going to spontaneously redesign themselves on her behalf. I want to name this plainly because it is one of the most important things we can say on this show. The mentor gap is not just about one woman having one mentor. It's a structural phenomenon. Research consistently shows that women, and women of color in particular, just like Candice, have access to mentors at roughly the same as men. What they don't have access to at anywhere near the rate is sponsors. People with real power who are actively advocating for them in rooms they're not in. People who are sharing the informal knowledge. People who are doing the invisible work of development that never shows up in a performance review, but determines everything about who gets moved forward and who gets left behind and waiting. Candice had been waiting and watching and delivering and waiting some more. And then she made a decision. And she told me, you're pricey, but you're good. And I'm going to tell you that sentence tells me everything about who Candice is, because she was not in a position of comfort when she made that decision to invest in coaching. She was in a position of frustration and uncertainty and the specific exhaustion of a woman who's been doing everything right and moving the way she should be moving and not going forward. She chose to invest in herself anyway, deliberately, fully, and with the clarity of someone who was looking at the situation honestly and decided that waiting is no longer a strategy that she's willing to run with or to sit on. That decision changed everything, not immediately, not in a straight line, but fundamentally and permanently. Candice stopped waiting for the organization to develop her and started developing herself. She revamped her resume and her LinkedIn until colleagues were stopping her to say, your story is incredible from reading your profile. It just started showing up in the rooms and decisions were being made. And she was naturally reaching out and having skip level conversations, making sure that the people with power over her trajectory knew her name and her goals before the conversation about her next move ever happened. She did the soul work. She implemented a suggestion I give all my clients, and that's practicing a miracle morning practice with the 10-10-10, the discipline of an AM ritual, of time with herself and her soul before the day could take her, the brag audit, the evidence confrontation, the internal work of believing that what she had delivered was worth claiming out loud in writing. And in every room she walked into, she naturally began showing up as her whole self. And when she went up for the promotion the first time, she didn't get it. And she stayed and she kept doing the work. And when she went up the second time, the manager gave a handover to her new leader that Candice told me she wished she had recorded, because the praise was everything she'd been delivering for years, finally said out loud by someone with the power to make it matter. She got the promotion. She's now in her dream home. Her parents walked through that dream home and could not believe where they were. Her daughters were watching a mother who is leaving proof that you do not have to wait for someone to come get you. You can go get there yourself. And outside of her career, Candice owns a party venue, an event venue, a coup venue in South Carolina, 25 minutes outside Charleston, that has become something that she has built because she looked at her community and saw a need that was not being met and decided to meet it herself. Same instinct, the same self-sovereignty, the same soul power applied in every direction. Candice is thriving, her word, not surviving anymore, thriving. And it started the day she stopped waiting for the mentor and became the woman she needed. I want to spend a moment on the structural piece because I think it's important that we come and name it clearly and not let it slide into a conversation that puts the responsibility entirely on the individual woman. The informal mentorship and sponsorship network that exists in most organizations, the one that moves people forward invisibly and likely prejudicially, was built by people who were not imagining women like you in those seats. It operates through affinity, through comfort, through matching, through you look like who we want there, you look like us, through the human tendency to develop and advocate for people who remind us of ourselves. This is why alumni associations and why racism still exists. It's not a conspiracy. It's really human nature operating inside a system that was built for a particular kind of person. And the result is that women and women of color at compounding rates are systemically less likely to be brought into the informal network, less likely to be sponsored by someone with real power, less likely to receive the invisible development in terms of potential into promotion. And if you want to know how a community and a tribe pattern can be so powerful, look at what Black women are doing in some of their post-college organizations. Look at how they also aggregate for power and support. It's a beautiful thing when people can get together and lift each other. But in a work environment, we have people in all strata. And knowing who you are and claiming it and taking responsibility and taking steps to be seen is the responsibility. And there's no excuse to stop trying, even though it didn't work once. You've got a map because what's not working for you tells you what to fix on that map. It tells you where the gap is so that you can be strategic about how you fill it, not waiting for the system to fix itself, but building what you need with intention and sovereignty. That's what Candice did. That is what I did. And that is what I want to give you the framework to do. So here's the framework. The framework has 3 parts, and I want to be clear that these are not consolation prizes because the mentor didn't show up. These are sovereign, personal, radical responsibility moves. They're what it looks like to stop waiting and start leading from your own developmental desires with the same intention and rigor that you bring to everything else, likely all other aspects of your life. So part 1 is the audit the gap. Honestly, I want you to look at your current professional network and ask 3 questions. Who in my orbit has real power? Not just advice, but actual influence over decisions that affect my trajectory. Who among those people knows my work specifically enough to advocate for me when I'm not in the room? And who is actively doing that? Be honest, be brutal, be truthful with yourself, because the gap between what you need and what you currently have is information. Don't take it personally. Don't take it to put yourself down. It just tells you where to put your energy. Most women, when they do this audit, discover that they have mentors, people who give advice, who listens, who encourage, very few sponsors. People who are fighting for them in the rooms where the decisions are made. That is asymmetry in the gap, and it's fixable. You have to see it before you can clearly address it. Part 2 is building your own board. And I want you to think about the development you need and did not receive as like a curriculum. And then I want you to build the faculty for that curriculum, not by asking one person to be everything, by identifying specific people for specific things, the person who knows how power operates in your organization and will tell you the truth, the person who has navigated the kind of transition that you're trying to make and will share what they actually did, the person who has enough visibility and credibility to say your name in the right rooms. These relationships are built the way Candice built them, not by asking for favors, but by being genuinely useful by delivering before your request. So by showing up in the rooms where the people you know are already operating, and you're not asking for charity, you're being visible and you're being helpful and you're showing your worth. And so that you're building a network of mutual camaraderie and investment. And you're doing it with intention because you understand that the informal version of building a network, especially in your own workplace, was not going to build itself around you. Part 3. Become the mentor in real time. This is part of what most frameworks leave out, and I think it's important. The women who break through the broken rung, the ones who make it through the filter and arrive at the higher levels, have a responsibility. Not a moral lecture here, but a strategic and soulful imperative. Pull someone up. And if you're that person, look down, look around, pull someone up. Not because it's nice, because it's the only way the system actually changes. I can remember a coworker who was very good at what she did, but she did not have a college degree. And she felt embarrassed and shamed by that. And she was visible with the fact that she didn't have a college degree. Like she sort of like made that more known than she needed to. And it held her back. And when I saw her work, I'm like, hey, I want you to be in this regional position. She's like, are you sure? I don't have a college degree. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? I'm like, stop being the negative Nilly here. I want to elevate you because you're good. And I didn't do that just to be nice, although it was great that it was, but because I saw someone who had potential and I know that the network was not working for her in the company and that someone, me, needed to take action to help her be more visible and believe in herself and see what she was actually bringing to the table. So I always wanted to be that person who was lifting someone up and not having to go through the barbed wire that I did. Candice was already doing these types of things for herself, and she mentors women in her organization. She tells them, document everything. And yes, indeed, document everything. She tells them, do not keep your head down and expect someone to notice. She tells them, get in the room, speak up, make sure the people with power know your name and know your goals before the conversation about your future ever happens. She's giving away the roadmap that nobody handed her, not just out of generosity. This is how the system changes. One woman becoming the mentor she never had and then turning around and being that for someone else. That's the chain. And you are a link in it, whether you choose to be or not. I want you to choose to be, please, to help all women rise. I want to come back to my own story for a moment because it belongs here at the close of this episode and at the close of this arc. I left the C-suite not because I had nothing left to learn or nothing left to prove. I left because I figured something out the hard way over 30 years. With no mentor handing me the roadmap and no sponsor fighting for me in rooms that I was not in, I figured out that the soul work that I had uncovered for myself years earlier with my breast cancer journey had to come before the strategy. Because when I found my soul's energy and power, I found a new version of me. And that belief underneath the ask determines everything about how the ask lands. When I came back to work more whole, more full, more powerful, I was able to break through and sort of outwork or outsmart or outendure the system, sort of because I was a little bit more, not a little bit more, because I was freed up. And the ones who do the inside work first and then bring that grounded, clear, unshakable energy into every room they walk into, I figured that out alone over decades at significant personal cost. And I thought if no woman had to figure this out alone again, and that is enough already. That is soul powered career coaching. That is why I developed Moby. That is every episode of this show, every coaching session, every community of women we have built out for 12 years and 2,000 clients. It's my answer to the absence, my answer in response to the gap, my version of becoming the woman I needed and then making her available to every woman who comes after me. You do not have to figure this out alone. That's the whole point. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in Candice's story or in mine, if you've been watching other people get handed the roadmap while you figured out by yourself, I want you to know something. The absence of a mentor is not a verdict on your potential. It's a gap in the system. And it's also a gap in how other people are manipulating and moving and maneuvering the system. And you have everything you need to fill it, not by waiting, but by deciding. The woman you have been waiting for is you. She's always been you. And now I want to talk to that version of you right now. I want to talk to the woman who has been doing the work, all of it, invisible, without anyone in your corner, fighting for you the way that you've been fighting for yourself, who's watched colleagues with less experience and few results move forward faster because they were in the right network, knew the right people, got the informal development, maybe looked like certain people. And when you don't, you have a disadvantage. And it's rare that someone's going to come and fill that gap for you. If you have stayed in your professional self, but not lifted yourself out, and you've been patient and strategic, I want you to stop that. Because you got to understand that patience is creating bitterness. It's expensive. And you can't afford that tax anymore. And I see you, and I've been you, and I really need you to hear this. The absence of a mentor is one of the most insidious forms of the broken rung because it is invisible. No one's measuring that. Nobody can point to the moment it didn't happen. There's no incident report, no conversation to replay, no villain to name. There's just this quiet, consistent, structural reality that the informal network was not built with your name on it, not built for people like you, and nobody came to build it around you either. And this is real, and it's not your fault. It's not a life sentence either, because what I've learned from watching 2,000 women move through this work, the women who close the gap are not the ones who finally found the perfect mentor. Yes, they've gotten coaching, but they're the ones who stopped waiting for one and started building the things they needed for themselves, the network, being the person that they needed to be to get those sponsorship relationships rolling, have that internal power to create that internal certainty that their work is worth claiming loudly and their goals are worth pursuing directly. Do you know that for every opportunity that you don't get, it's between $20,000 and $50,000 a year of a gap? And if that happens for the next 20 years of your career, that could be $1 million of lost earnings. And it's not all about the money, but if you miss out on $1 million of earnings, how does that affect your future, your family, your freedom, your finances? Like, impacts it. And so you've got to be feeling that you're worth pursuing that for yourself. And you've got to be your own sovereign queen over your development. And that sovereignty, that specific quality of a woman who has decided that you're no longer waiting for permission or discovery of someone else's recognition to move. It's the most powerful professional asset I have ever witnessed. It's available to you right now in the decision you make today about whether you're going to keep waiting or whether you're going to start building. Nobody's coming. That's the truth. And it's also the beginning of your freedom, because the moment you stop waiting for someone to come get you is the moment you start going to get yourself. You are not the problem. You never were. And here's your one thing to stop. Stop waiting for the mentor to appear before you start moving. The development you need does not require someone to hand it to you. It requires you to decide you're worth investing. Your time, your money, your energy, your full commitment. And then go build what you need with that. Same deliberateness, same intentionality. Candice didn't wait until she could afford it comfortably. She invested when it was a stretch because she understood that staying stuck was more expensive. The choice of staying where you are is more expensive than moving forward, investing in yourself, and doing the right things that are going to move you forward. That decision is available to you today. And here's the one thing to start. This week, I want you to do the sponsor audit I mentioned earlier. Not the mentor audit, the sponsor audit. Look at your current network and ask honestly, who in my orbit has real power and would say my name in a room that I'm not in? That's your audit. If the answer is nobody, that's the most important piece of strategic information. And don't be in denial about it. If it's nobody, do the work. Build the relationships. Start with asking from someone who you know will be helpful to you. Show up, deliver, be visible, be in the rooms. The relationship builds from there. And here is your truth to carry forward from this episode. This show has been built on one belief, that the women who are stuck are not stuck because they are not enough. The women who are stuck because they've been playing by rules designed to filter them out. Hear me say that. The rules are designed to filter you out, more so now than in the past 50 years. Carrying the emotional tax of being underestimated, waiting for systems that were not built to see you, doing the work without the roadmap, figuring out alone when you should have had someone in your corner, that ends here. Enough already. Not because the system itself needs to be fixed. You need to decide that you're going to fix what you can to get your outcome and to get things rolling for your career. You become the strategy. You become the sponsor. You become the mentor. You become the woman you need. And now, on the other side of that decision, you turn around and you become her for someone else. That is the chain. That is how it changes. That is women rising. Enough already. Women, let's rise, and let's rise each other. You are not the problem. You never were. I'll see you on the next episode. This is Coach Mo. If today's episode hit home, share it with a woman who needs to hear it. Because the best thing we can do is make sure no woman sits alone in an experience that has a name. You've been listening to Enough Already. I'm Coach Mo Fall. Please subscribe and like and comment so this can be sent to more women just like you who needs to hear there is a different way. Take good care.